The billionaire was known across the country as a man who could buy almost anything. His companies dominated several industries. His name appeared in magazines that listed the richest people in the world, and his lifestyle was the definition of luxury. Private jets waited for him at airports, rare cars filled his garages, and his home stood in the most exclusive parts of the world. Yet despite all the wealth and power he had built over the years, there was one thing he cared about even more than money, and that was the future of his family. His only son was about to inherit everything one day, and the billionaire believed that the person his son chose to share his life with would shape the direction of the entire family legacy. The son had grown up surrounded by privilege. From childhood, he attended elite schools, traveled across continents, and met people that most ordinary individuals would only see on television. Many people assumed that such an upbringing would make him arrogant or careless, but the truth was more complicated. The father had always tried to teach him discipline and responsibility, reminding him that wealth could disappear if it fell into the wrong hands. As the son grew older and approached adulthood, the billionaire began thinking seriously about the next step. He wanted to see what kind of judgment his son would show when faced with a decision that involved both emotion and responsibility. Instead of simply asking his son to find someone he loved, the father decided to create a challenge that would test his character in a way few people would expect. One evening, he called his son into his large study, a quiet room filled with bookshelves, dark wooden furniture, and wide windows overlooking the city skyline. The atmosphere felt serious, and the son immediately sensed that his father had something important to discuss. The billionaire spoke calmly but firmly. He explained that the time had come for his son to begin thinking about marriage and the future of the family. However, he added that he did not want the choice to be made casually or without thought. The woman who became part of their family would not only be a wife, but also a partner who would influence future generations. Because of this, the billionaire had prepared a very unusual test. He told his son that he would arrange a special gathering where several of the most famous and admired models would be invited. These women were known for their beauty, elegance, and public attention. At the gathering, the son would be asked to choose one of them. The father explained that whoever his son selected would be welcomed into the family and could eventually become the mother of the next generation of heirs. It sounded like something taken from a movie rather than real life. The son listened carefully, trying to understand whether his father was serious. The billionaire's expression made it clear that he was. To the father, the challenge was not about beauty alone. He wanted to see how his son thought, how he observed people, and what qualities he truly valued when making an important decision. The son understood that this was more than just a social event. His father was watching closely, expecting him to reveal something about his character through the choice he would make. Word about the gathering quietly spread among the father's inner circle, and preparations soon began for a luxurious evening unlike any other. Invitations were sent to a group of highly admired models who were used to glamorous events, but even they were curious about the unusual purpose behind this one. The billionaire's mansion was prepared for the occasion with bright lights, elegant decorations, and staff moving quickly to ensure that every detail appeared perfect. The stage was being set for a moment that would reveal more about the young heir than anyone could predict. The father believed that when someone is placed in a room full of temptation, attention, and expectation, their real values begin to show. For him, the challenge was simple in appearance, but deep in meaning. He wanted to see whether his son would be guided by appearance, pressure, or something far more thoughtful. The son knew that the evening ahead would not just be a party. It was a test designed by a man who had spent his life understanding people, power, and choices. The night of the gathering arrived with a level of excitement that the billionaire's mansion had rarely seen before. The property itself was already famous for its beauty, with tall gates, wide gardens, and a grand entrance that looked more like a luxury hotel than a private home. Long black cars began arriving one after another, stopping at the front driveway where attendants politely opened doors for the guests. Cameras were not invited to the event, but the atmosphere still carried the energy of something glamorous and exclusive. Inside the mansion, large crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, reflecting soft golden light across polished marble floors. Music played quietly in the background while servers moved through the room offering drinks and small plates of carefully prepared food. Everything about the environment was designed to feel elegant, impressive, and unforgettable. The billionaire had spared no expense in preparing the evening, making sure that every detail matched the reputation he had built over the years. As the guests entered the main hall, it quickly became clear why the event had attracted so much curiosity. One by one, the invited models arrived, each of them bringing a presence that instantly drew attention. These were not ordinary guests. Many of them were women whose faces had appeared on magazine covers, fashion billboards, and international advertising campaigns. They were used to walking on bright runways and standing in front of flashing cameras. Their confidence showed in the way they carried themselves, their posture straight and their movements graceful. Some wore elegant evening gowns that sparkled under the lights, while others chose sleek dresses that highlighted their style and charm. Their makeup was flawless, their hair carefully styled, and their smiles practiced from years of public attention. Conversations began forming around the room as people greeted each other with polite enthusiasm. The models spoke softly among themselves, exchanging compliments and curious questions about the unusual reason for the invitation. Although they were all successful in their own careers, this event had created a quiet sense of competition that none of them could ignore. Each woman understood that the billionaire's son would soon walk into the room and that he had been asked to make a choice. Some models laughed confidently, believing that their beauty and charm would naturally attract his attention. Others remained calm and observant, studying the room and the people around them. Every glance, every smile, and every small conversation seemed to carry a hidden purpose. Across the hall stood a group of business partners and close friends of the billionaire who had been invited to witness the evening. They watched the scene with curiosity, whispering among themselves about what might happen next. For many of them, the idea of gathering such a group of glamorous women for a single decision felt unusual, even for a man as powerful as their host. Still, they trusted that the billionaire had his own reasons. At the center of it all, the billionaire himself stood quietly, greeting guests and observing the atmosphere he had created. His expression remained calm, but his eyes carefully studied every movement in the room. To him, this was more than a luxurious party. It was a moment that would reveal something important about his son's judgment. Meanwhile, the models continued to fill the hall with color, elegance, and confident energy. Their laughter blended with the soft music, creating an environment that felt both glamorous and tense at the same time. Some guests admired the beauty surrounding them, while others wondered how the young heir would possibly choose among such stunning individuals. The entire room seemed to revolve around anticipation. Everyone knew that the real moment of the evening had not yet begun. The gathering had become a display of charm, elegance, and quiet rivalry, with every model hoping that when the billionaire's son finally entered the hall, his attention would rest on her rather than anyone else. As the evening continued, the conversations in the grand hall slowly shifted toward one shared question. Everyone was waiting for the arrival of the billionaire's son. The models had already filled the room with elegance and confidence, but the real purpose of the gathering had not yet begun. Soft music still played in the background, and servers continued moving between guests with trays of drinks, yet the atmosphere had grown more focused and tense. Every now and then someone would glance toward the large staircase at the far end of the hall, wondering when the young heir would finally appear. The billionaire himself stood calmly near the center of the room, greeting guests and exchanging a few quiet words with close friends, but his eyes often moved toward the entrance as if he too was waiting for the moment that would reveal everything. Then the doors near the staircase slowly opened, and the room grew quieter almost instantly. The billionaire's son stepped into the hall with a calm and composed expression. He was dressed formally but simply, wearing a dark suit that reflected the elegance of the event without drawing unnecessary attention to himself. Conversations softened as guests turned to look at him. Many people had seen photographs of him before, but this was the first time some of the models were meeting him in person. The young man paused briefly near the entrance, taking in the scene around him. Bright lights reflected from the chandeliers above, casting soft shadows across the polished floor. The hall was filled with beauty, confidence, and expectation. His father watched him closely from across the room, saying nothing. It was clear that the moment of decision had arrived. As the son began walking slowly through the hall, the attention of nearly everyone followed him. The models adjusted their posture slightly, some offering warm smiles as he passed by. A few greeted him politely, introducing themselves with calm confidence. Others simply allowed their presence to speak for itself, standing gracefully while waiting for him to notice them. For someone else, the scene might have felt overwhelming. Dozens of beautiful and accomplished women stood around the room, each hoping to make a strong impression. Yet the young man did not appear rushed or distracted. Instead, he moved carefully from one side of the hall to the other, observing quietly. He listened when someone spoke to him, nodded politely, and continued walking at a steady pace. His behavior confused some of the guests. Normally, in such situations, people expected quick reactions or visible attraction. Many assumed that the son of such a powerful billionaire would immediately be drawn toward the most glamorous person in the room. Instead, he seemed thoughtful and almost distant from the excitement surrounding him. He spoke briefly with a few of the models, asking simple questions and responding with respectful politeness, but he never stayed long in one place. His eyes continued scanning the room, as if he were searching for something beyond what everyone else could see. The models began noticing this unusual behavior. Some exchanged small glances with each other, unsure how to interpret the situation. A few attempted to start light conversations with him again as he walked past, hoping to capture his attention for longer. Their voices were friendly and confident, yet the young man responded in the same calm manner before moving forward once more. The guests watching from a distance began whispering among themselves. They expected the choice to happen quickly, perhaps after a few short conversations or moments of admiration. Instead, the young heir seemed to be deliberately passing by every model in the room without showing a clear preference. His father continued observing from across the hall, arms relaxed, face unreadable. The son walked past groups of elegantly dressed women whose beauty had drawn global attention on fashion stages. Yet his expression remained thoughtful rather than impressed. One by one he moved through the hall, stepping past individuals whom many people would have considered the obvious choices. The glamorous smiles, the perfect appearances, and the confident introductions did not slow him down for long. He continued walking as if something else held his attention, something that the rest of the room had not yet noticed. As the billionaire's son continued moving slowly through the hall, the tension in the room grew stronger with every step he took. The models who had arrived with confidence now watched him more carefully, trying to understand what he was thinking. Many of them had expected that their beauty, charm, or reputation would quickly capture his attention. Yet he had already passed by several of the most admired women in the room without showing any clear interest. His calm expression remained unchanged as he walked past the sparkling gowns, confident smiles, and graceful introductions. Some guests standing near the walls exchanged curious glances, wondering whether the young man was simply taking his time or whether something unexpected was about to happen. The billionaire himself continued observing quietly from across the hall, his eyes following his son's movements. The son walked past another small group of models who greeted him politely, their voices warm and welcoming. He nodded respectfully, listened for a moment, and then continued forward. At that point, the room had grown so quiet that even the soft music seemed distant. Every person present was focused on the same question. Who would he choose? The models stood patiently, maintaining their elegant posture even as uncertainty began to grow among them. Then the young man slowly reached the far side of the hall where the bright lights from the chandeliers did not shine as strongly. This corner of the room was quieter, away from the center of attention where the glamorous guests had gathered. Near a long table filled with empty glasses and serving trays stood a woman wearing a simple uniform. She moved quietly, carefully collecting used plates and arranging them neatly so the servers could carry them away. Unlike the models in the hall, she was not dressed to attract attention. Her clothing was plain, and her posture reflected someone focused on work rather than appearance. She had been part of the household staff for the evening, helping the team manage the busy gathering. Most of the guests had hardly noticed her presence as they spoke, laughed, and admired the beauty around them. The young man slowed his steps as he approached that quiet corner. For a moment, he simply watched the woman as she continued organizing the table with calm focus. She seemed unaware that the entire room had fallen silent behind him. When she finally looked up and saw him standing there, her reaction was one of surprise. She straightened slightly, unsure why the billionaire's son had come to speak with her. The contrast between her simple appearance and the glamorous crowd across the hall could not have been more obvious. The models in the center of the room began noticing that the young man had stopped walking. Their attention followed him toward the corner, confusion slowly spreading across their faces. Some of them whispered quietly, trying to understand why he had moved away from the group. Guests standing nearby also turned their heads in that direction. What they saw made the entire situation even more puzzling. The son of the billionaire was now standing in front of the quiet maid who had been serving drinks and clearing tables throughout the evening. Instead of continuing to search among the models, he spoke to her calmly. His voice was soft enough that the people across the hall could not hear the exact words, but his posture suggested genuine interest rather than casual conversation. The maid listened politely, clearly unsure how to respond to such unexpected attention. Meanwhile, the models watched from across the room with disbelief. They had arrived prepared to impress the young heir, believing that the choice would come from among them. Yet the man they were trying to impress was now speaking with someone who had not even been part of the invitation list. The whispers among the guests grew louder as the unusual scene continued. The young man stood calmly in front of the maid, asking her a few quiet questions while she responded with simple, respectful answers. For a moment, the glamorous hall seemed frozen in confusion as everyone tried to understand why the son of one of the richest men in the world had stopped his search in the most unexpected place in the room. The moment people realized where the billionaire's son had stopped, a wave of quiet shock moved across the entire hall. At first, many guests believed they were misunderstanding what they were seeing. The young heir was supposed to choose from among the glamorous models who had been invited for the evening. Yet instead of standing among them, he was now calmly speaking with the quiet maid near the corner of the room. Conversations that had once filled the hall slowly faded into confused whispers. Heads turned from every direction as guests tried to make sense of the unexpected situation. The models who had been standing confidently in the center of the hall began exchanging uncertain glances. Their elegant smiles slowly faded, replaced by expressions of disbelief. Some of them looked toward the billionaire as if expecting him to step forward and correct the situation. Others watched the young man closely, waiting for him to move away from the maid and return to the group where they believed the real decision should take place. But the son remained exactly where he was, speaking calmly with the woman who had been clearing tables only moments earlier. The difference between the two sides of the room could not have been clearer. On one side stood a collection of internationally admired models wearing beautiful gowns and confident expressions. On the other side stood a woman in a simple uniform who had not expected to receive any attention at all. The contrast created a tension that filled the room with curiosity and disbelief. Several guests near the center of the hall began whispering among themselves, quietly asking questions. Why was he talking to her? Was he simply thanking the staff for their service? Or was there something more happening that no one had anticipated? The models watched closely, trying to understand the young man's behavior. Some of them adjusted their posture again, hoping he might still return to the group. A few attempted to maintain their confident expressions, but the uncertainty was becoming difficult to hide. This gathering had originally felt like a glamorous competition where beauty and charm would easily guide the decision. Now the situation felt completely unpredictable. Meanwhile, the maid herself looked visibly surprised by the attention she was receiving. She held the tray she had been organizing only moments earlier, unsure whether she should continue working or focus on the conversation. The young man spoke to her with a calm and respectful tone, his posture relaxed and patient. Those who stood close enough to observe noticed that he seemed genuinely interested in what she was saying. The guests who had gathered along the sides of the hall could hardly believe what they were witnessing. The son of one of the richest men in the world appeared completely comfortable, speaking with someone whom the rest of the room had barely noticed. Across the hall, the billionaire remained silent. His expression revealed almost nothing, though his eyes remained fixed on the scene unfolding before him. Some of his business partners standing nearby leaned toward each other and whispered quietly, unsure whether the evening was following the plan or moving in an unexpected direction. The tension continued building as more people realized that the young heir had not moved away from the maid. Instead, he seemed to be paying closer attention to her than he had to anyone else in the room. The models watched with growing disbelief, some folding their arms gently, while others continued standing still with forced patience. Guests near the walls shifted their positions slightly, trying to get a clearer view of the corner where the conversation was taking place. What had begun as a glamorous gathering now felt like a moment of suspense where every person in the hall was waiting to see what the billionaire's son would do next. The tension in the hall grew heavier as every guest waited to understand what the billionaire's son would do next. His quiet conversation with the maid had already changed the mood of the entire gathering. What had started as a glamorous evening filled with confidence and admiration had turned into a moment of deep curiosity. People were no longer focused on beauty or elegance. Instead, their attention was fixed on the young heir standing calmly in the quiet corner of the room. The models who had once stood proudly in the center of the hall were now watching from a distance, their expressions filled with confusion and disbelief. Some of them whispered softly to each other, trying to guess what the young man might be thinking. Others remained silent, simply observing the unusual scene that continued unfolding in front of everyone. The maid stood with a mixture of surprise and uncertainty, clearly aware that the attention of the entire room had shifted toward her. She had arrived that evening expecting nothing more than a normal night of work, helping serve guests and keep the event running smoothly. Now she found herself standing face to face with the son of one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. The young man listened to her carefully, asking a few calm questions while maintaining the same respectful tone he had shown from the moment he approached her. Those close enough to observe could see that his interest was genuine rather than casual. He did not appear distracted by the glamorous crowd watching from across the hall. Instead, his focus remained entirely on the quiet conversation happening in front of him. After a short pause, the son slowly turned and looked toward the center of the hall where the guests and models were standing. His calm expression suggested that he had already reached a decision in his mind. The room became almost completely silent as people noticed the change in his posture. Even the soft background music seemed to fade beneath the weight of the moment. The young heir then spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. His voice carried across the hall without hesitation. He explained that throughout the evening he had carefully observed the environment his father had created. He had seen confidence, beauty, and elegance in many forms. The models who had been invited were impressive in their own ways, and he respected the effort each of them had made to attend the gathering. However, he also noticed something else while walking through the room. While many people were focused on being seen and admired, there were others quietly working in the background to ensure that the evening ran smoothly. The maid standing beside him had spent the entire night helping guests without expecting recognition. She had remained polite, focused, and respectful even when no one was paying attention. The son explained that for him, the challenge was not about choosing the most glamorous person in the room. His father had created a situation filled with temptation and attention, but the real test was about understanding what kind of character he valued in someone who might become part of his life. Beauty could be admired for a moment, but qualities like humility, kindness, and quiet dedication revealed far more about a person's true nature. The guests listened closely as the young heir shared his thoughts with calm confidence. The models watched in silence, slowly realizing that the decision was no longer about appearances or public reputation. The young man then looked once more at the maid beside him, acknowledging the sincerity he had observed in her actions throughout the evening. The room remained still as everyone waited for his next words, realizing that the unexpected moment they were witnessing was about to reveal the deeper meaning behind the unusual challenge the billionaire had created.